Stay with us, 12 noon today with the economic advisors, Dr. Furman. This is Bloomberg on radio, on television.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
Mercedes-Benz is on a path towards CO2 neutral mobility. So we have flicked the switch there, and really we're going to step by step electrify everything. And what does that mean? Combustion engines get electrified.
How are you navigating what seems to be a really tough situation better than almost anyone else?
We've worked hard on the supply chain. There's no question there's a lot of work to do in the supply chain for semiconductors. And we're happy that we were able to exceed our second quarter guidance, as well as, guide up for the rest of the year.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Live from New York City for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. 30 minutes away from the opening bell. Let's get the month of August started. The countdown to the open starts right now.
Everything you need to get set for the start of U.S. trading. This is Bloomberg, the Open, with Jonathan Farrow.
From New York, we begin with the big issue, pushing ahead to Payrolls Friday.
The jobs numbers,
payrolls, the labor market outlook.
All economists right now are waiting to see how the data come in.
You have to think about the data.
The lack of labor. The issue we have here is not a lack of demand for workers.
There's some issues with labor supply.
The lack of supply.
The functioning of the labor market.
It's going to take longer for the full recovery to take place.
September and Q4 is a time when labor supply might begin to be unlocked, so to speak.
What happens in September?
Kids are back in school.
Unemployment benefits coming off.
The shortage shortages ease and labor comes back.
Chair Powell, the Fed is certainly anticipating that will help to open up labor supply.
With us through the opening bell, Charles Schwab's Kathy Jones, JP Morgan's Jack Caffrey, and Mike Schumacher of Wells Fargo. Let's start with the data this Friday. What you expect, what you're looking for. Kathy, you first.
Well, on the payroll number, we're looking for about 800, 850. We think that we'll start to actually see some of those government jobs come back because of the reopening of schools. So we're looking for a pretty healthy number. Also, the seasonal adjustment factors kind of favor a bigger rather than a smaller number.
Mike Schumacher, you looking for that strength too?
Yeah, pretty similar, John. I will say one thing that's a little bit different, though, is that when you consider the last, call it 4 to 5 payrolls numbers, the range of forecasts has been enormous, and there's been a lot of play in those numbers. I think that's still the case for this month. So although we're pretty much in line with consensus, 865-ish, I think there's a fair degree of pretty wide confidence interval around that number.
Yeah, Mike, you're right to point that out. The median estimate consensus right now, 888. Moving target going into Friday, the range anywhere from 1.2 million at the high end and 350 at the low end. Seems to me, Jack, we're still struggling to read this labor market month to month.
Yeah, I do think that the labor data in particular has been higher than usual volatility. I think we're going to be also paying a lot of attention to revisions, and we're going to have some pushback as well. How much of the weakness do you see as we try to think through the inventory issues? You know, are people who have seasonally gone back to work, particularly in the auto industry, able to actually do that because of some of the inventory overhang that we still are still working through?
I've described the month of August as the road to September, and to what extent the Delta variant may derail some expectations of a return to work, a return to school. This is what the Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari had to say on that very issue.
I was very optimistic the fall would be a very strong labor market with many of those Americans coming back to work. That's still my base case scenario, but if people are nervous about the Delta variant, that could slow some of that labor market recovery and therefore be a drag on our economic recovery.
That is the big issue for so many people worldwide. Joining us now on that story is Michael McKee, Bloomberg International Economics and Policy Correspondent. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, John. Well, Neil has a point, and if the Delta variant is going to be an issue, you'll see it here in the participation rate. The number of jobs created during the month of July is going to be important, of course, but it's really the number of people who are looking for work that the Fed is following, and you can see there that the participation rate, the white line, has just started to tick up. That is for prime age workers. For young people, the blue line, it's come down a bit, and look what's happened to those over 55. They've really left the labor force, and that is leaving a big hole in skilled employees. So companies are having a hard time filling some of their jobs. As John mentioned a little bit earlier, we are seeing a forecast for better job growth. 888,000 now. It was 900,000 before that. It's come down a little bit. The unemployment rate also expected to come down a little bit, and average hourly earnings expected to be strong, but the participation rate supposed to tick up, but just a little bit. So that's not going to be good enough if the Fed is waiting to see more people come back into the labor market. And of course, keep an eye on unemployment. We've talked a lot about the minority unemployment the numbers that the Fed wants to see. This here is unemployment forecasts. The blue line is what the market sees. The white line is what the Fed sees by the end of this year. And as you can see, the Fed much more optimistic than the markets, so they will be looking to see if their outlook is ratified, John.
Mike McKee, looking forward to the coverage going into Friday. There's some division at the Federal Reserve. That's not a secret. It was captured perfectly going into the weekend with two Fed officials, Governor Brainerd and President Bullard. Let's start with Governor Brainerd. This quote right here: "The determination of when to begin to slow asset purchase will depend importantly on the accumulation of evidence that substantial further progress on employment has been achieved. Employment has some distance to go." Governor Brainerd pointed to the month of September. President Bullard had this to say about the month of September: "My preference would be to get to a decision in September and start sometime after that. We would go ahead and get the taper going to handle the possibility that inflation is more persistent and higher than we'd like." Michael, Kathy, Jack, I'd like to understand from your perspective who you think wins out here, Governor Brainerd or President Bullard. Kathy.
I would say Brainerd. I think she probably wields more influence at the Fed right now, is more closely aligned with Clarita and Powell, and I think that the fundamentals will probably bear that out as well.
Jack, this month of September seems critical. Governor Brainerd going on to say, I expect to be more confident in assessing the rate of progress once we have data in hand for September. Seeing the September data, you'd have to wait until October, and that timeline shifts much more towards the back end of the year. Jack, is that in line with the sequencing that you expect?
I do think that the Fed is going to continue to be accommodative, and therefore I think, I'm honestly a little surprised that Bullard is actually talking a little bit more hawkish than his reputation would suggest. He's typically been one to urge for accommodation and for patience. And I do think we're forced to confront a few more issues, as mentioned by Neil Kashkari, understanding Delta and watching what lag that will cause in terms of the policy reaction function.
Stephen Stanley of Amherst Pierpont came out swinging about 30 minutes ago. Take a listen to this call for a move next year, in June of next year. Take a listen.
They're coming around. 3-4 meetings ago, all Powell was talking about was, the unemployment rate's too high, and even the stated unemployment rate understates the health of the labor market. And with each successive meeting, he started to talk a little bit more, acknowledging that labor demand is very strong. I think they get it next year. I think that I have my first rate hike is June, so middle of the year.
Mike Schumacher, June of next year. That's the call coming from Stephen Stanley of Amherst Pierpont. He thinks they're wrong on the labor market and they're starting to realize it. Do you?
I think they probably are wrong on the labor market, but it doesn't mean the Fed's going to go in June. Actually, I think he's got the month right, but the year is wrong. We'll sign up for 2023. And it's interesting, John, if you think about the incentives for Jay Powell, is there any reason at all for him to try to go early? Probably not. He wants to be dovish for at least a few more months. It does seem to us, though, Wells Fargo, the big issue, and this is probably true for everyone on the call and in your audience, is just how long does that inflation surge last? The Fed may well have this wrong. It may change its tune, but we think it's way too soon to make that call.
Kathy, is it too soon?
Yeah, I would agree with Mike on that. We're close. We're more in the 2023 for liftoff. I think it's just too soon to assess, how many moving parts we've had right now on the inflation outlook. It's really tough to make that call, and I don't see why the Fed would rush it.
Another big week for the bond market. We've been talking about the data, the Federal Reserve. We need to talk about how this market may or may not respond to it. With that, it's Kaylee Lyons. Hey, Kaylee.
Well, John, Wednesday could be a big day for this bond market because that is when we get the quarterly refunding announcement from the Treasury Department. It's not this one that in particular that will be a big deal, considering the $126 billion in quarterly purchases of notes and bonds is expected to stay the same. It's what they could signal about when they are going to pull that back. And a lot of banks on the street expect that to be November. JP Morgan is one of them, and they expect issuance of notes and bonds in 2022 to be about $1 trillion less than next year. Basically, the government is just not going to need to borrow as much, and that could mean a whole lot less supply. And that also could, in theory, coincide with the Federal Reserve beginning to taper its monthly bond purchases. Of course, the Fed is looking at the data in order to decide when that taper is going to begin. We're going to get a number of data points this week, not just payrolls on Friday, but of course, ISM manufacturing today. You also have durable goods, factory orders, ISM services throughout the week as well. And of course, jobless claims come on Thursday. And finally, John, it is earnings season, though this is the last major week of it. About 3/4 of the market cap of the S&P 500 has already reported, and we'll get results from more than 140 companies over the course of the week, the bulk of them in healthcare and utilities, and we will also have about half of the materials and energy sectors reporting as well, John.
Kaylee Lyons, thank you. Thank you very much. On this bond market, how many times have people come on this show and said, yields don't belong down here? How many times have they said that on this show? Yields should not be this low. They should not be down here. Here's another one from Morgan Stanley. We think that 10-year yields are too low, in large part due to unwinding positions that have magnified the impact of negative COVID headlines. In our view, yields don't appropriately reflect the strong U.S. economy for the Fed's stance. Kathy, that may well be true. What's the reason for them to go higher anytime soon?
Yeah, I think that there's most of us who run models that try to find fair value probably believe that yields are awfully low relative to where our models suggest they should be. But I wouldn't hang my hat on growth being necessarily the driver, because the connection between real yields and real growth has been deteriorating for quite some time. It's been particularly weak during QE periods. I think what it takes is higher wages, lower unemployment rate, and the thought that perhaps the Fed's reaction function will be late. And, look, this is by design, right? They're trying to have a late reaction function. I think the bond market will react when they see the Fed have a lagged reaction function to inflation and rising wage pressures.
The relationship between the data and the bond market, I think, is really important. And Mike, there isn't much of a relationship right now, because people keep saying yield shouldn't be down here based on what? Based on the data. This is what BMO, Ian Lingen and his team had to say. And this is the quote that matters for me. The extent to which treasuries will be driven by the fundamentals is as much of an unknown as the actual data itself at this stage. Now, Mike Schumacher, you've been frustrated at times with this bond market too. How important is that one line?
Yeah, John, I'd say the bond market and the economic data are having a trial separation right now. Probably won't last forever. They'll get back together eventually, but not quite yet. So what does the bond market care about? It's pretty simple. It cares about the Fed. When the Fed gives a signal, as Kathy just noted, that it's likely to taper, the bond market probably says, oh, okay, we get the joke. It's time for real yields to go up a lot. It's time for nominal yields to go up quite a bit. But that's not today. That's probably a Q4 event in our view.
Jack Caffrey, you're sitting there on the equity side of things, trying to work out what the bond market strategists are talking about a bond market that doesn't reflect anything in terms of the economic data according to the bond market strategists. And as I work my way and rattle through those lines, what does that even mean to you, Jack?
Confusion, but more realistically, I wind up looking to, say, the MOVE index to try to understand what the bond market traders think the chances of them being wrong are, or right. And certainly over the past several weeks, we saw a fairly dramatic uptick in that measure of implied volatility. It pulled back a little bit over the last couple of days, but to me, that seems to be somewhat suggestive of strongly held views, strong views weakly held. And a willingness to revisit those views more or less on a data point by data point basis.
Jack, do you think that should lead to more volatility in equities?
I do, and I do think that pointed to an interesting break where implied fixed income volatility was moving higher, implied equity volatility was really lagging that, and I think we saw some of the pain that can come from that over the past several days, end of last week, where the equity market did seemingly want to look at what was going on, looking at good earnings news, and digested it a little bit with more uncertainty than you would have anticipated, based on what was a seemingly low measure of price movement.
Jack, as a PM, what are you doing then to prepare for that?
Yeah, I think you look at that disconnect, and I try to take a longer term view. I try not to be as responsive or reactive to what I'm seeing on a minute by minute, tick by tick, trade by trade. But I think my bigger picture view is that we're going to see some slowing in the economic data relative to what we've seen over the last several years. I do think that when we look at, to the extent we're seeing surprises, they've actually been very much in line. So that the news is good, but it's not better. And I think that puts an emphasis on looking towards better quality equities, better quality companies as something you want to own over the next 12 to 18 months, rather than necessarily trying to trade around what's going to happen over the next day or week, especially with very low volumes over the next, call it 4 to 6 weeks. So it's going to be much harder to make trades within the equity market during that time frame.
We'll continue this conversation. Jack, Kathy, Michael, sticking with us. Let's get you some price action at the market desk with your movers. Here's Abby.
John, well, we do have the U.S. equity futures up modestly, not helping, though, the shares of Square. Shares of the digital payments company are down on the news that they are buying Afterpay. This is an Australian buy now, pay later company for $29 billion. This is in a bid to bring on younger users. Plus, it puts them into the consumer lending space. In addition, Square did report it's a mixed quarter. They missed on revenue. So, again, those shares are lower. Turning to what was hot last week, the the reflation and reopening trade. This morning we have the banks higher, we have metals higher, we also have the travel sector higher. Take a look at some of these cruise operators. Carnival in particular up 1.5% on the news that their Princess Cruise line has resumed. So despite the Delta variation spreading, there is optimism that folks will travel, John.
Abby, thank you. Coming up, lawmakers making progress down in Washington, D.C. The Senate closing in on a bipartisan deal. That conversation is coming up next from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Said was we need to make them in America. Does that include overseas companies making them if they have the plant in America?
I would certainly be in favor of them having operations in America. Absolutely. You know, Samsung, TSMC, there are companies that are in allied countries, and you know, we certainly want them operating in America and producing chips in this country, yes.
So we have a significant chip issue, but there are other supply chain issues as well. As I know you're monitoring what's going on. Where have you seen other problems in the supply chains right now in the United States that need to be addressed?
Particularly in home building supplies, you know, lumber, and all the related supplies, glue, adhesives, and you see it playing out. You know, home prices are high. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you'll see prices are a little bit high, and that's all because of the lack of supply, just disruption.
Trading revenues coming in better than expected. Everything cash, $1.4 trillion of cash. One of the most notable aspects of this report that was stellar.
Drafting it, the text will be done. Hopefully we'll introduce it today. We'll vote on it tonight. We'll start amendment process hopefully on Monday. If not, but we want to be done by Thursday. We want to move on.
On Friday night, we did send out to Senate offices a large amount of the authorizing the policy legislation. Overnight, we've been finishing up the spending provisions, the appropriations provisions, and marrying them to the bill. And we really are just about finished.
Closing in on a $550 billion bipartisan infrastructure bill. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer expecting the legislation to pass in just a matter of days.
In the end, the bipartisan group of senators have produced a bill that will dedicate substantial resources to repair, maintain, and upgrade our nation's physical infrastructure.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Emily Wilkins down in Washington, D.C. Emily, we're almost there.
We are definitely almost there. If you are a Senate negotiator, and almost there means that the legislation is going to be passing the Senate. 2,700 pages released at 9 p.m. last night. Senators, or more likely Senate staff and lobbyists, are combing through today, looking at all these individual provisions. But the Senate is feeling very good about their chances of moving this bill through the process. Definitely need to keep an eye on what amendments are going to be offered by Democrats and more notably Republicans who want to try and get a number of amendments on this bill. But look, it's not done when it passes the Senate, rather. It has a way to go before it gets to President Biden's desk. It has to go through the House, and at this point, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it will not be getting a vote until the Senate sends that $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. A still long way to go on that, so we're not near the end zone quite yet. Still have a little bit of a ways to go. This is going to be infrastructure summer here, not just
just an infrastructure week. And while today is a big week for a number of senators who have been working on this bill for months, we're still at least about a month away from the end of the road here.
Will that become infrastructure fall? Let's hope not. Emily, thank you. Emily Wilkins down in Washington, D.C. We appreciate your time. We're getting closer. We're not there yet. That's the summary down in D.C. Back with us is Kathy Jones, Jack Caffrey, Mike Schumacher. Jack Caffrey, this feels like the story we were training on back in January. Is there any scope for upside surprise here?
You know, I think if Wall Street operates under the premise of under-promise and over-deliver, I think Washington tends to over-promise and under-deliver in terms of their timing estimates. And that's just a function of having to navigate tremendously divergent interests and timing and recognition needs. So to some extent, I think the upside coming out of policy is less likely than not. And I also have issues with where we started this conversation around labor markets, the ability to actually engage in infrastructure spending in a timely basis. To the extent people don't see everything that they want, they tend to litigate. And I do think we have some questions about labor supply to have an ongoing housing recovery coupled with an infrastructure boom simultaneously. You know, these both require, tremendous amounts of skilled trades, and we haven't spent a lot of time increasing the supply of people in the skilled trades for years, if not decades.
Yep. Kathy, do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree to some extent. I tend to not think that labor supply is quite as restrictive as a lot of people do. I do think once the incentives kick in, meaning higher pay, better benefits, et cetera, opportunities, you'll see people come in. It's just harder when you get to smaller numbers. But I think the big issue with infrastructure is that the amount of money sounds big, but it's spread out over 10 years or more. So the kick to the economy is going to be a small and gradual one, not all at once.
This plays into the peak conversation. Mike Schumacher, you get the final word on this. We've seen a conversation about peak rates of growth, maybe peak inflation fears, perhaps peak fiscal. This is the conversation here. My colleague, Liz Capper-McCormick, out on the Bloomberg today talking about peak issuance as well. How do you fold all this in, Mike, into the bond market?
Yeah, peak issuance is here, John, in our estimation. And it's interesting when you think about the infrastructure bill, $550 billion, as Kathy said, spread out over many, many years. So it doesn't really impact macro markets that much. And you have to put this in context. So the U.S. federal government's going to run a deficit this year of around $3 trillion. Next year, we think it's about 1.2. So even if that whole $550 billion showed up in 1 year, it would still be a massive reduction next year. So peak issuance is upon us. Whether Treasury acknowledges that this week or in November doesn't really matter much. So in terms of macro markets, infrastructure is not the big deal. It's that 3.5 trillion Goliath that Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer are talking about. That's the big issue for the markets.
If we can get it done. 121 right now on 10s, just a break of that at the moment. Mike, Kathy, Jack will be sticking with us. Coming up, your morning calls and later. A strong start to earnings season, keeping macro concerns at bay. That conversation is coming up next. 7 minutes away from the opening bell this Monday morning, looking to kick off the month of August on the front foot, up 18 on the S&P. We advanced 0.4% from New York City. This is Bloomberg.
Right now, about half of U.S. households invest. We'd like to get that number up to 95+%. Investing should be as ubiquitous as shopping online. It should just be something that people do.
Five minutes away from the opening bell in New York City this morning. Good morning. Here's the state of play. The price action going into the cash open. We advanced 0.4% on the S&P. The Nasdaq advancing about 0.5%, underperforming through July, outperforming on the session. The Russell up 0.7%. That's the price action. Let's get you some morning calls. Kicking things off with Deutsche Bank. Downgrading Estee Lauder to a hold. The analysts no longer seeing a compelling valuation following the stock's recent outperformance. Next up, Benchmark raising its price target on Charlotte Communications to a street high 900. The analysts expecting broadband growth to continue for the foreseeable future. And finally, Raymond James upgrading First Solar to positive. The analysts seeing improving demand and solid pricing trends after the company's quarterly results. That stock is positive by 3.67% to 89.20. Coming up on the program, a strong start to earnings season, keeping macro concerns at bay. That conversation up next. From New York, the opening bell's next. Your equity market shaping up as follows. On the S&P, up 0.4. On the Nasdaq, up 5. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
It's really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
Closing out July with a 6th straight month of gains on the S&P 500, the longest monthly winning streak going all the way back to September 2018. Kicking off August with futures looking okay, up 19 on the S&P, up 0.4% on the Russell, up 0.7% on the Nasdaq, up 0.5%. There's the opening bell. Switch up the board and get to the bond market. Your 10-year yield looks a little something like this. 2 dates for the diary. Friday, payrolls. Next Wednesday, CPI. Setting the tone for the month of August with a yield starting the month at 121. Yields in about a basis point on 10s. Into the FX market, dollar showing a bit of weakness through the session, through the bulk of G10, through the bulk of the day. Euro dollar 118.79. We're positive there about 0.1%. And crude down 0.9% to 73.25. That's the cross-asset story at the market desk with your movers. Here's Abby.
John, well, let's start out with a deal story, the one that we covered earlier. And that, of course, is Square buying the shares or the company Afterpay, Australian buy now, pay later company. This puts Square into the consumer lending space. It also puts them in front of younger users. Square earlier had been down about 3% because they also missed revenues in their most recent quarter. Not so much now, turning around, plus Afterpay, the bought company, soaring up 18.7%. Turning to other big tech last week, this was a little bit of an Achilles heel for the markets, down after reporting mainly decent earnings. Today we have a little bit of a bounce back for big tech, so not what happened in April where you had companies put up great quarters and shares still sold off. Today, again, at least the start of this week, John, big tech is making a little bit of a rebound.
Abby, thank you. Thank you very much. Your session shaping up as follows. On the S&P, advancing 0.4%, unchanged on staples. They're lagging this morning. Top of the pile, consumer discretionary, up 0.7%. Information technology, up about 0.6%. The earnings have been solid, trumping other external concerns on Wall Street, particularly over the last couple of weeks. Barclays saying earnings have provided, quote, a welcome fundamental support to equities given growing macro worries. On that story, here's Candy Lines.
Well, John, we've gone through the majority of earnings season at this point. More than half the companies in most major benchmarks have reported, and by and large, they are surprising to the upside and really posting remarkable earnings growth. The average company in the S&P 500 seeing profits double on a year-on-year basis in the second quarter, and the smaller you are, the more that is true. The S&P Mid-Cap Index up 187% in terms of EPS growth, while 198% growth is what we see for the Russell 2000. And Europe is seeing really solid results as well. EPS on average up 171% for the stock 600. And with that European earnings strength, estimates have been getting revised higher and higher. Now actually back to the levels we saw last before the pandemic, and the upgrades are accelerating the Citi Earnings Revisions Index, showing the pace of EPS upgrades against downgrades in Europe is near a record. So optimism on earnings overtaking other concerns, macro headwinds, including the Delta variant, and of course, the question of inflation. And of course, it is the cyclicals within Europe and the U.S. that have seen some of the strongest growth. When it comes to the sales figures, the company in the S&P 500 seeing sales up about 27%, and over, of course, materials and energies here on the right side of this chart seeing growth higher than that, 51% in the case of materials, 105% growth on revenue in the case of energy, John.
Kelly, thank you. This is one of the #1 conversations we've witnessed on Wall Street over the last couple of months, isn't it? The inflation debate. The Fed Chair Jay Powell last Wednesday in the news conference was talking about this. He defined transitory as a price level move that doesn't shape the inflation process and can go on for 12 months. Many people disagree with this Federal Reserve. I'm aware of that. But when you ask people what underpins the distinction between their view and the Federal Reserve's, Mohamed El-Erian came out with a revealing response a couple of weeks ago when he said, look to what corporations are telling you. And I have to say, the difference between the communication you get from the Fed and the communication you get from companies, just take a listen to what the CEO of Heineken had to say on the inflation story.
Across the board, we see, more inflation than we have seen probably at any time over the last decade. Now, we are able, through our hedging policy, to lock in lower pricing than what you see kind of top line in spot pricing, but still the impact will be significant.
Back with us, Kathy Jones, Jack Caffrey, Michael Schumacher. Kathy, that first line, across the board, we see more inflation than we have seen probably at any time in the last decade. You don't hear these kind of things from the Federal Reserve. Do you think it's an important distinction, what corporations are telling us and what we hear from central bank officials?
Well, I think it's important, but, the bottom line is right now, the way the Fed's looking at least, we have a supply-demand imbalance. And does that imbalance fix itself? in the next 6 to 12 months, or is this something that's going to be more persistent? And I think that gets back to the wage question. You know, you can have supply limitations, but the demand has to be there. Aggregate demand has to be strong enough to have that pass through to generate inflation longer term. And I think that's what the Fed is kind of waiting to see. That's what we're waiting to see. We know that we have some price increases here. We don't know if aggregate demand is going to be strong enough to sustain those over time.
Clearly, there are temporary factors behind the surge in inflation in specific pockets of this economy, used cars, etc. But Mike Schumacher, it's the companies that are going to set wages that could lead to a virtuous cycle of higher prices down the road. That would be shaping and reshaping the inflation process, which is the definition, according to Chairman Powell, of an inflationary story that he'd be a little bit more concerned about. Mike, is that something you can see developing?
Sure, we can see it developing, John. And it was interesting to hear the comments from the Heineken CEO and other corporate leaders as well. As price pressures continue, they can perhaps take a hit to margins for some period of time, but sooner or later, if that goes on, I do suspect they'll probably pass some along to consumers. You'll see CPI go up even faster in that case. But the bigger issue, again, is wages. Wages are sticky. Once a wage cycle begins, it's very difficult to reverse it. We could see that happening. If it did, we think it would be a clear signal that the Fed, the ECB, others are really out there quite a bit, and they've got a lot to risk on their call. We're
clearly in a transition here. Morgan Stanley have been talking about this mid-cycle transition for a while. Jack Caffrey, you and the team at JP Morgan are doing exactly the same thing. Can you help our audience understand from a portfolio perspective, for you yourself, an equity portfolio manager, as you work through a transition like the one we're working through, the kind of adjustments that you're making?
You know, it comes back to the conversation we were having a bit earlier, thinking about peak, peak growth, peak earnings gains year on year on a percentage basis. And in that environment, you start seeing the most cyclical parts of the economy typically lead you out of the bottom. And the relief that comes with that, if you didn't actually have your worst fears recognized. So if you think about an economy slowing from 6.5% growth perhaps this year to a number with a 4 in 2022, perhaps something with a 2 in 2023, I think an investor starts thinking that those deep cyclicals, those traditional almost value stocks, start coming under a bit of pressure. And then I think with that, the focus comes towards more, what are businesses that can grow that are less reliant on just economic growth, just inventory corrections to drive their top lines. Wage gains, allowing the consumers to spend more will certainly be very helpful in that story. And we also have in this conversation a lot of focus on inflation. And if inflation does run a bit hotter than in the past, that can start putting some pressure on the other extreme side of the market, not the value stocks, but in this case, the secular growth stocks. Where having earnings 5 or 10 years from now is really powerful. But if those earnings have to get discounted at a higher rate due to inflation, and inflation does bring its own uncertainty, which can put some pressure on extremely high valuations. And I think portfolios are going to perhaps move a bit away from the tails of the equity market of secular growth and deep value and start paying a little bit more attention to more of the core of the market, more of the core of the equities, where things are growing, but growing more steadily perhaps, albeit a little bit more slower than what you might see in either, in an airline or a cruise line right now, or perhaps in some of the more extreme sides of the software sides of the investment environment in the technology space.
Jack, what would that mean for the NASDAQ versus Russell debate? I might be accused of dumbing things down sometimes for the equity market, but I think it's a perfectly legitimate question that tells you a lot about the person and the person's thinking when they give you their answer to that question. The Russell had some clear underperformance through last month. The NASDAQ 100 had some clear outperformance over the last month. What does everything you've just said mean for this debate?
It actually, I think, points to S&P beating both. Which we didn't really get into, and shame on me for not bringing that into the discussion, because the S&P gives you more exposure to the global economy necessarily than the U.S. economy captured, in the small cap index. I think the S&P gives you exposure to businesses that probably have more sustained pricing power relative, perhaps, than just the focus on the technology sector. And I think when you think about that dichotomy, secular growth in tech, perhaps versus small cap, mid cap. In terms of which winds up being very much a domestic discussion. I think that the environment has to be one of, we are talking about global growth actually being fairly robust and more robust than that's been seen in several years. even if some pockets of the emerging markets are creating a little bit more volatility and perhaps an ulcer or two for managers who are very focused on that niche.
Well, the EM trade has been tremendously difficult. I'll catch up with Damien Sassower of Bloomberg Intelligence to touch on that and the economic data a little bit later in the programme for those of you looking for that topic to be here. Kathy, just to build on some of the things that Jack's been talking about, this mid-cycle transition, Morgan Stanley discussing it, JP Morgan discussing it. Is that what you and the team at Schwab think we're working through at the moment?
Yeah, we think there's a pretty good chance that that's what we're working through. You know, every expansion has these, and every cycle has these ups and downs, and we think that there's a good chance that we are in sort of this mid-cycle decline that in yields, at least, that will start to pull higher as we go forward. You know, there's not a lot to suggest that the economy is going to slow down anytime soon. There's not a lot to suggest that there's a lot of impediment to further progress in the economy or in inflation pressures building. So it looks like that's where we are right now in the cycle.
Mike Schumacher, final word on this topic.
Yeah, it does seem to us, John, that as far as the switch, let's say, from early to late cycle starting to happen, perhaps a bit early. Our equity team was pretty aggressively into the recovery stocks early on in the year, worked for a while, it's faded a bit, but we can see that playing out over the next 6 months.
Mike Schumacher, Kathy Jones, Jack Caffrey. Guys, good to catch up as we kick off the month of August and work our way through this month and look to a pivotal month, the month of September, where so many people are looking for this economy, the supply side of this economy, to respond. That sets the stage for basically everything going into year end. Let's get you some of the price action at the market desk with your movers. Here's Abby.
John, well, the month of August is starting off with a bullish bang. We have the S&P 500 not so far from its all-time high made last week. A piece of it, the automakers. If we take a look at the likes of Tesla, GM, Ford, Stellantis, we have nice gains here in Europe. Renault was upgraded by HSBC to a buy, and there's just continued optimism for the automakers that the shortage is going to be worked through, plus the move into electric vehicles, EV, really being received well. Turning to the vaccine makers, we have lots of green here too, and this says Pfizer and Moderna have made the announcement that they are hiking prices in the EU, this after the AstraZeneca vaccine lost popularity. This is a hike by 25%, so it's material, so you can really see the effect for these stocks, John.
Abby, thank you. Just a final word on Square. Was down in the pre-market early this morning. It's up now by, what is it, 4, 5, 6 percentage points following this $29 billion deal. What's your take, Abby?
Well, it seems that investors like the fact that that the company is broadening into the younger user base plus consumer lending. So it diversifies the company a bit away from its more traditional digital payments business. I think just the optimism that they're broadening out a little bit, John, is helping the stock because it is really quite a turnaround, especially given the fact that there were mixed earnings in terms of revenues missing the mark.
Up by 6.8% in early trading. Abby, thank you. Where money moves, this company wants to be. And we've been talking for a long time about who would be buying Square. Have the banks missed the boat? Square's now a $120 billion company. Take Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is a 22 billion euro bank. Investors coming to grips with lingering concerns over China. More on that conversation's next from New York. About 13 minutes into this session, this Monday morning, kicking off things for August. On August 2nd, your equity market's up 0.5% on the S&P. The Nasdaq's up a third. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
assume you have a lot of people saying the food isn't as healthy as they might want it to be. Is that the biggest challenge, or just growing the company?
Ray Kroc had a famous line, if you're not green and growing, you're red and rotten.
We believe that the market expectations for China have been too high for too long.
Increased regulation, geopolitics, and corporate defaults.
Underweight the region all year.
Marginally overweight Chinese equities at the moment, despite Beijing's regulatory crackdown.
Those factors are not going to be resolved in the near term.
We see that as short term.
China will act as a sort of a negative factor on global markets probably for the next month or two.
Beijing tightening its grip on the private sector, stoking a $1 trillion sell-off in Chinese assets. BTIG's Julian Emmanuel weighing in, writing the following: if China remains committed to the view that fundamental contradiction does not exist between socialism and a market economy, rebalancing an equity portfolio towards China exposure presents a potential high-risk, high-reward opportunity. On the market, Damien Sassower and Bloomberg Intelligence joins us right now. Damien, help us work through some of these issues at the moment.
Well, I think we have to really make a distinction between the equity market and the credit market. I mean, when we're talking about Chinese equities, look, we've seen some big bubbles hit. I mean, we saw 2015, the RMB devaluation down 40%. We saw the trade war in 2018 down 30%. But I mean, you know, the recent, kind of hit in Chinese equities, the yuan has just been remarkably stable. I think it's been really supportive for it, and I think there's more to go there. The real distinction is in credit, in Chinese credit, where we see now 25% of all dollar-denominated China debt, yielding above 7%. It's 25% of the market is China, and 2/3 of the EM dollar-distressed debt universe, Chinese issuers.
Damien, these stats are amazing. I'm going to go over them twice so our audience can write them down and really reflect on it. They make up 25% of all dollar-denominated EM bonds trading above 7% and makes up 2/3 of the distressed EM universe. China, China, China. Damien, are people concerned that this bleeds out beyond this region to elsewhere?
Well, I think, if you want to talk about the bleed out and the contagion to emerging markets, you got to look at the PMI data, you got to look at the fundamentals, look at the supply constraints, and it's really just, it's what's creating this reflationary environment because the demand is there, Jonathan. It's just the fact that there's supply bottlenecks that are kind of clogging up the system that's spilling over into EM. But certainly from a equity market standpoint, I think EM equities are still depressed. I think there's more to go there. On the credit side, though, spreads are really, really tight, Jonathan. And if you're looking for some yield, China's one place you might want to find it if you have the stomach for that risk.
Well, Damien, you need the stomach for it, that's for sure. Just touch on the data one more time for me. The PMIs into the weekend, new export orders, really soft, below 50. What's the story here? What's brewing?
Well, for me, it's really going to be the small versus the big. And this is really what's driving a lot of Xi's policies now, right? If you look at the PMI data, it's the caption, which is really, down much worse than the official numbers. What that tells me, it's small and medium enterprises in China which are getting hurt. And you see that in all the sub-indices of the official data as well. So, look, this is what Xi is trying to rectify by the hit on ed tech, by the hit on big tech, by the hit on property and financial services, Huarong, Evergrande, et cetera. But, it's going to be interesting to see how creditors take advantage of these prices, really of the opportunity here, if you want to call it that.
And how these policymakers in China deal with the spread of the Delta variant as well is a key issue too. Damien, it's good to catch up. Some amazing stats in the credit market there from Damien Sassower, Bloomberg Intelligence and the team. In this market right now, we need to work our way through some of the restrictions coming into the US economy again. And what we're about to see play out is a series of news conferences, one from Governor Cuomo and another from the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, with some of the headlines. Here's Abigail Doolittle.
Indeed, John. Right now, Governor Cuomo is giving a live update on the coronavirus situation and here in New York City. And the headline to cross right now is that the MTA Port Authority will require vaccines or weekly testing for its workers, similar to the federal government and some other organizations more recently. In addition, it's thought that New York will be encouraging, not mandating, encouraging masks inside, that folks should follow the CDC guides until there is some sort of a law or mandate. But right now, there is not a mandate around masks. So we are seeing this continued move toward either vaccination, mandatory vaccination, or the choice of weekly testing. That is the case right now for the MTA and the Port Authority. Per Governor Cuomo, Bill de Blasio, Mayor of New York City, will also be giving an update at 10 a.m. We'll be there to cover what he says in addition, John.
Abby, thank you. Appreciate the update. We really do. In your equity market to kick off August, stocks higher. Let's get some sector price action with Dave Wilson. Hey, Dave.
Hey, John. 9 of the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500 higher at the moment. Tech stocks basically little change. Communication services lower. When you look at the best performers on the day, it's a really kind of economically sensitive areas of the market. Energy, financials, industrials, materials. Those are your 4 best performers. Now, you'd think with the financials that Square's deal for Afterpay would be helping. We should note, though, Square not in the S&P 500. So you have to look elsewhere to see the effect of the gain in that stock. And it shows up in a Bloomberg index of payment processors and networks. Square, the top performer on the day in that group, followed by Affirm Holdings, which is a competitor of Afterpay, the company that Square has agreed to buy for $29 billion. You can contrast that, though, with Global Payments. They came out with earnings today, didn't go over so well. The stock's lower now. And it's a group that really has been over the past several months trying to find direction. So you can argue that with sort of the split result today, maybe that struggle will go on.
Dave Wilson, thank you, sir. Coming up on the program, your market moving events that you need to be watching, your trading diary into the weekend. Got 4 more trading days to go after this one, and payroll's Friday to round things up. We'll get through the main things next. From New York, up 18, we advanced 0.4%. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
Some of the best deals in history have been passed on by a very large number of people. The money is made on the aberrations. And so I would say you want to be generally open-minded and humble about your conclusions about what all these different signals mean.
Bloomberg Television is reinventing one of the most iconic brands in financial television for a new audience. Join me to see the news program for the clever investor. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week.
Five minutes into the session, early days, session's young, still look good though, up 0.4% on the S&P, advancing 18 or 19 points, clear outperformance on the Russell this morning, the small caps up by 23, up by a little more than 1 full percentage point on the NASDAQ, leading the month of July, coming into August, lagging just a little bit early in the session, up by about 0.25% on the NASDAQ 100. That's the price action in the equity market. Let's get to the trading diary and what you need to be watching as we kick off the trading week. Top of the hour, ISM manufacturing numbers. Do not miss that. Alex Steele, Guy Johnson will run you through a breakdown, as I'm sure Michael McKee will do as well. Earnings from Alibaba and BP on Tuesday. Fed Vice Chairman Richard Clarida speaking on Wednesday. A speech on outlooks, outcomes, and the prospects for U.S. monetary policy at a virtual event hosted by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. That's one for the diary you don't want to miss. Then on Thursday, a Bank of England rate decision, and finally, closing out the week with payrolls Friday. Your estimate so far, moving target, your median estimate in our survey, 888,000. From New York City, that does it for us. This was the countdown to the open. With equity markets pushing higher, this is Bloomberg TV.
Assess the sector as a whole? Is it making a better case for itself at the right price at this point?
Most of the big hedge funds, most of the people that have been growing, have been delivering very good performance. We have, but so is a number of the peers. You know, it is definitely the hedge fund business is getting more about the large getting larger and generating more performance, being able to hire the best people, thereby generating better performance, thereby getting larger. So when you look at the performance of the largest, say, 20 or 50 hedge funds, the performance has been pretty good over a number of years, and the inflows have been pretty good. You know, this is another quarter of positive inflows for us. I think one of the bits you're seeing at the moment is every client is worried about inflation. When they say they're worried about inflation, what they really mean is, I own a load of bonds, is that going to cause me a problem?
An exceptional Q2. It's time.
The narrative of the day is strong earnings.
Bloomberg has the numbers.
We have about $12 trillion worth of market cap right here.
Find out who's winning.
Tesla beating across the board.
And who's losing.
That's actually pretty rare for Amazon. They typically don't miss on that scale.
And the voices to give you the important news.
Samsung reported another stellar quarter of earnings.
We are very clearly looking with confidence about what's next.
Bloomberg Television, your home for earnings season.
Months after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico is still in peril. Huge swaths of the island are still without power, running water, or access to medical care. Experts estimate that it will take years before these services are restored island-wide. Much of the blame has been placed on FEMA for a slow response in comparison to recent disasters on the mainland. But recovery from a disaster of this complexity and scale has proven more challenging than anyone anticipated. And filling the gaps between an overextended public sector and a suffering populace falls on the private citizens. Robert Anderson is a Puerto Rico resident of 4 years.
The eye of the storm came in south of El Yunque, swept up towards San Juan and out to Arecibo.
Everything on the right-hand side is what we call the dirty side of the storm.
This isn't his first time in a disaster zone. With a military and telecom background, Anderson worked on repairing damaged cell phone towers in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Some might be tempted to label him a disaster capitalist, seeking lucrative government contracts for his expertise. But as Anderson finds himself in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, he and his associates are developing a variety of pro bono recovery projects that target the island's hardest hit areas.
I see two Puerto Ricos. We're here in San Juan. They have telecommunications restored. They may or may not have power, but basic services are in place. They're able to get food. They're able to buy things. They're surviving. And when you look outside of the San Juan area, you can go 15 minutes from here and find areas that are devastated. I'm working on the devastated side.
Today, he's put together a boots-on-the-ground mission to provide medical care to some of the island's most isolated and vulnerable residents. Steve Berenbaum is one of Anderson's business associates. He offered an extra car and a set of hands.
So we received an initial report from a nurse that was out in the area. We're headed to the northeast region of Utuado for some people that are in need of urgent medical assistance.
Dr. Sally Priester is a physician from San Juan. She filled a van with medical supplies at her own expense and brought along a team of nurses. Google Maps estimated our first destination to be a 90-minute drive. But it didn't account for obstacles like this. Our first stop was the home of an 82-year-old blind Vietnam veteran. His roof was blown off by the storm, and he's been living alone in a back shed for nearly 2 months.
His cane actually got broken in the storm, so he's limited mobility. He has a number of medical ailments. Dr. Priester's having a look at him. We called the VA. They're going to get him set up with what he needs, get him stabilized so he can then be transported either to an evacuation center or off the island. It's when the chain gets broken, when those families that are connected to them leave the island or take off, these guys get left at the end of the road, and it's tough.
FEMA was not officially part of Robert's team, and their arrival caught everyone by surprise. Their job here was to survey and report back to their superiors, and did not come with medical aid of any kind.
People think that FEMA is there to hand out bottles of water, and it's not what they do. FEMA has a role to play. They have a very specific role. They bring in ships, they bring in airplanes, they bring in tractor trailers with pallets of things. But they're a big machine, and there's gaps in that thing. And you're seeing one of the gaps here, and we help fill that role. These guys are in a bad situation before, and now they're struggling for real basic things. One of the risks that you run is people going from fear to hopelessness. Those are the folks that we're trying to reach.
And how are they reached? How are they even found?
Word of mouth, mostly.
And what's your role in all this?
Ghost in the machine. I'm lucky enough to be able to communicate with folks in FEMA, the state of Puerto Rico.
For a ghost, Robert makes his presence well known. Not only was he the de facto leader of the mission, now with FEMA in tow, he created his own maps to survey storm damage.
So we're right here.
And delivered them to FEMA HQ free of charge.
I have pretty good reach.
Perhaps that's how he managed to earn himself a coveted FEMA badge without actually working for them. And it's these relationships that allow him to operate more efficiently than an NGO or a government agency.
We're able to resolve problems at a different level.
Our next stop was on a mountaintop, a family of 11 struggling to care for their special needs brother in what was left of their house.
Probably we are the first health team to come and visit this family.
Muy bien, todo muy bien.
The patient has Down syndrome. He is all day in bed. The difficulty with this is the patient cannot be alone. The most important thing is that you need to...
Okay, traders, it's time to play stop and profit for Japanese yen. And I'm going to play stop and profit at 109.440. All of you guys who followed trade from last week, and we, as you remember, and you can see from our ticker on the streamer, we sold short Japanese yen. The price was sold 109.540. Right now, it's time to place stop on profit at 109.440. It will give us £1,000 in profit. So all of you guys who manage it worth to hold over the weekend, as you understand, broker pays us for holding short positions. So we didn't lose anything at all. Plus, we gained already profit on Japanese yen. We haven't sold yet, so we're still waiting. If it will move even further, we will place stop on profit even to better advantage. Okay, I'll speak to you later, guys.
Why he's alone right here? Because I think so. Life happens. Yeah, I'm here by myself. So ¿dónde vive acá? En la parte de... This is not a job. To do this, you need to have passion for what you can do. You're not going to get paid.
It's said in disaster response and emergency response that the real first responders are your neighbors. You don't need to wait for a lucrative FEMA contract to go out and do good and to help the community.
In the end, do you feel like you're making a difference?
Lives you touch and people that you can affect. I don't really think about it in those terms.
But why do you do it?
It helps me sleep at night. I think it's as much for the people that are going out to help and do things as it is for the people that you affect.
Whether out of altruism, or the lure of a paid gig, or some mixture of the two, Anderson hopes to stay here to help shape Puerto Rico's future.
Puerto Rico's essentially been a colony for 400 years. It was treated poorly by the Spanish. It was not treated well by the United States when they first got here. Puerto Rico can continue in the way that it's always been, or Puerto Rico can rebuild itself like nothing that's ever been. And we have to do everything we can to make that real. That's the bottom line.
When I met him first online, I found him to be really sweet. I think I was the one who was talking for an hour. He was just listening.
When we met, I saw her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind, which was, something that I was looking for.
Anshu and Sumit are one of about 12 million couples that get married in India every year. Unlike their parents' generation, they're not from two close villages, but from two cities on opposite sides of the country. And their love didn't start through community matchmaking, marriage brokers, or classified ads in newspapers, but began online.
So we met through jeevansathi.com. So it's basically an online portal where we have detailed profile of different grooms and brides.
It makes a lot of remote profiles who are located in distant areas more accessible.
Thanks to growing internet and smartphone usage, matrimony websites and apps in India are starting to disrupt the matchmaking industry. More and more people are finding their partners at the click of a mouse. jeevansathi.com, where Anshu and Sumit met, is one of the biggest players. Young Indians looking for love set up profiles including their caste and horoscope, but their criteria for choosing spouses appears to be changing.
We have seen the shift from, traditional caste community conservative parameters to something like which is more focused on education, employment.
Anshu and Sumit's marriage was initiated by their parents, but modern Indian couples like them have more input than previous generations.
We looked up to them to agree for the proposal, but it was primarily our decision that we wanted to be with each other.
So what's the emoji like you use the most to send to each other?
There's a bear which basically we use for indicating a hug.
Yeah, that's our language basically. Bear icon for a hug.
Time flies when you're in love, and just 1.5 months after they first met online, the couple got engaged. They decided to hold their wedding less than 3 months later. But planning a traditional Hindu wedding on such short notice is no easy task. The massive event usually lasts 3 days, has various ceremonies and celebrations, and involves the entire two families and hundreds of guests. Luckily, there are websites and apps for that.
We searched online, we got in touch with Wedding Brigade, and they helped us finalize the venue. And it makes the search faster and efficient.
Startups like the Wedding Brigade are challenging traditional wedding planners in this $50 billion industry. It provides various services from booking banquet venues to buying wedding gowns. The website makes money by charging commission from vendors.
People don't want to be limited to what is available around them. They want to know the entire range of options available before making a decision. And now it's easy to find almost everything on one portal.
Anshu and Sumit are officially married in a ritual that has gone on for thousands of years, but their love started in a very new way. Technologies might be changing the way couples meet, date, and get married in India, but they're definitely not changing everything.
The technology was only the first level help that we could get to find each other. Everything else was like very humanly and emotions and feelings based.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has become a symbol of everything the Republican Party stands against.
Everyone gets a right to basic health care. We need strong oversight of these banks.
A legal scholar and a consumer advocate turned politician, Warren has branded herself as a champion of the working class and made a career out of standing up to big business. While rumors of a 2020 presidency bid remain just that,
I'm not running for president.
her Senate seat is up for re-election in 2018, and Republicans are already pumping millions into super PACs to defeat her. This is the story of how a law professor and politician came to be seen as the biggest threat to Republican values and the greatest hope for progressive America. Elizabeth Warren was born Elizabeth Ann Herron, the youngest of 3 siblings, on June 22, 1949 in Oklahoma City to middle-class parents. After waiting tables to help her family, Warren became a star on the high school debate. By 1980, Warren was a mother of 2, divorced and remarried, had earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston, a juris degree from Rutgers, and practicing law in New Jersey. Warren then went on to become an influential law professor, teaching, lecturing, and publishing highly cited work on bankruptcy and commercial law at 7 universities around the country, eventually settling at Harvard Law School. But Warren wasn't always a liberal lion.
Elizabeth Warren used to be a Republican, actually.
That's Stephen Dennis.
I'm a Senate reporter for Bloomberg. Around the time that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, she became a fierce opponent of a Republican drive to make it much harder to file for bankruptcy. She fought that for a decade. It ended up passing anyways.
While her efforts ultimately failed, her warning calls were heard in 2008.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis. Our entire economy is in danger, and without immediate action by Congress, America could slip into a financial panic, and a distressing scenario would unfold.
Professor Warren was tapped to help with oversight in the government bailout.
She would excoriate bankers and their bonuses and their practices.
Why should the U.S. taxpayer alone carry Citi?
She proposed a series of tough regulations, which became the basis for much of the Dodd-Frank financial law that we have today. That sort of catapulted her to national stardom, particularly among the progressive left.
Encouraged by her newfound notoriety, Warren declared her bid for the U.S. Senate on September 14, 2011. During the race, her opponent Scott Brown tried to derail Warren by accusing her of falsely claiming Native American heritage, a controversy that earned her the nickname Pocahontas. Nevertheless, she was victorious and won the Senate seat by a comfortable margin. She used her new tenure to challenge everyone, from banking regulators and Treasury officials to members of Wall Street and Congress.
I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. We need tough new laws to hold corporate executives personally accountable. No one should be above the law.
She called for Wells Fargo CEO John Stump to resign for fraud, introduced the Bank on Student Loans Fairness Act, and reintroduced the 21st Century Glass-Steagall Act. In 2016, after staying silent during the Democratic primary battle, Warren finally endorsed Hillary Clinton and had some harsh words for candidate Trump.
Donald Trump is a loud, nasty, thin-skinned fraud who has dates.
But she was wrong.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Warren wasted no time resisting Trump's agenda.
Have you ever managed or overseen a $1 trillion loan program?
I have not.
How about a $1 billion loan program?
I have not.
Okay.
In the Donald Trump era, Elizabeth Warren has been playing defense and trying to prevent Donald Trump and his cabinet appointees from rolling back protections that she helped enact.
Warren actually found herself rebuked by Mitch McConnell for reading a letter by Coretta Scott King about Jeff Sessions' record on racism during his confirmation.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
That moment became something that's on T-shirts, bumper stickers, slogans, and that really galvanized a lot of support for her. It's been very hard for Republicans to get much of anything done this year, and that's at least in part to this resistance movement that Elizabeth Warren has helped champion.
We are here to fight back.
Enough of Elizabeth Warren. Like you,
millions of dollars are being funneled to defeat Warren in the midterm elections in 2018. But it's the rumors of a 2020 presidential bid that has further prompted powerful donors to fund her opposition, often using the same playbook of constant and ruthless ad campaigns that many believe helped Trump win in 2016. It's anyone's guess if she will endure what Hillary could not.
You know, the question for Elizabeth Warren is whether she can go from being a liberal firebrand to somebody who can regularly get 60 votes for initiatives in the Senate and 218 in the House and drive an agenda, and whether she can bring together coalitions for political victories. That's the challenge, and we'll see what happens.
Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has made some powerful opponents.
He doesn't know me, never met me, doesn't know what I'm all about. I think they're very rude statements, and frankly, tell him I will remember those statements.
My message to Donald Trump and his team is that, your views of Islam are ignorant.
He's the first Muslim mayor of a major Western capital and proud of it. This is how Sadiq Khan went from the son of Pakistani immigrants to a lawyer, lawmaker, and now the mayor of London. Khan's parents emigrated from Pakistan. His father was a bus driver, his mother a stay-at-home seamstress. The 10-strong Khan family squeezed into a 3-bedroom flat in South London. He wanted to be a dentist, but TV in the 1980s convinced him otherwise.
Objection!
LA law with its swagger and ill-fitting suits caught Khan's eye. He graduated in 1991 with a degree in law from North London University and joined a human rights firm. Khan worked a number of high-profile cases, often clashing with London's Metropolitan Police Force. But he had bigger political ambitions.
This is what being a new MP is like, squatting on a bench in the absence of an office, dealing with letters from constituents.
Reports are just coming in of an explosion here in London.
And there's just explosions, and then it was just smoke everywhere.
Everyone's just asking what's happened.
Only 2 months after Khan entered the Commons as a Member of Parliament, London was attacked by Islamist extremists.
That day will stay with me for the rest of my life.
He spoke out against the attacks both as a London MP and as a Muslim.
He has been very clear about his opposition to violence, opposition to terrorism, and has set out to make the case for a more open and peaceful Islam.
That's Thomas Penny, one of Bloomberg's Westminster correspondents.
Here is a man who is a Muslim, and he is standing up and being open and straightforward and being clear that the problem here is not Islam, but it's Islamic extremism.
In 2015, a decade after the attacks, Khan ran for mayor of London, and his faith was back in the headlines. His opponent, Zach Goldsmith, trying to link Khan to radical Islam.
The debate got again personal and nasty. The Goldsmith camp has called Khan extreme and accused him of associating with, quote, those who seek to do our police and capital harm. It's a pattern of behaviour.
Even the former Prime Minister David Cameron repeated the allegations.
He shared a platform with Sajil Shahid, the man who trained the ringleader of the 7/7 attacks and accused the United States of bringing 9/11 on themselves.
But the smears didn't stick.
Zach Goldsmith ran a very negative campaign that was based on what people knew was a lie.
This election was not without controversy. And I'm so proud that London has today chosen hope over fear and unity over division.
After taking the mayor's office with a comfortable majority, Khan has brought a business-like efficiency to the role, scrapping expensive vanity projects like the Garden Bridge and the new Routemaster buses, which cost £350,000 each. The former lawyer who used to fight the police in court is now praised for his close relationship with them.
I was talking to a very senior police officer in the Metropolitan Police who said there was a sea change when he went into City Hall, and the police were saying how much they welcomed this because they knew where they stood and it was more straightforward to work with. So he works like a lawyer, he works like a government minister.
Khan's kept his faith at the fore. He's an outspoken voice for moderate Muslims across the world.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Now, by giving the impression that Islam and the West are incompatible, you're playing into the hands of the extremists.
The ongoing spat between Khan and US President Donald Trump escalated when Trump went after Khan, misquoting him on Twitter just hours after the terrorist attacks of June 3rd, 2017. Khan's now one of the most prominent Labour politicians in the UK. In fact, a recent poll of Londoners found Khan was more trusted to keep the country safe from terrorism than the Prime Minister or the Labour leader. His story of going from the son of an immigrant bus driver to the mayor of one of the greatest cities in the world plays well with Londoners. But can he appeal to the rest of the nation? Has Khan got his eye on the top job? And is the UK ready for a Muslim Prime Minister?
What does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated.
Okay, traders, I'm going to move again to our advantage. Stop for Japanese yen, and the price I'm going to move 109.390. It will give us 15 pips. And money-wise, it will give us £1,500 in profit. All of you guys who purchased short position last week, please do so. Please place stop at 109.390. Stay safe.
Possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
When it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
People think of Vladimir Putin, they think of capital P, power. And that's exactly the impression he creates. Whether it's physical power, firing different weapons, riding in various James Bond-esque modes of transportation, or tossing hapless opponents in judo. Or political power, ruling his own country with an iron fist, crushing his political opposition, or, most recently, being accused of meddling in foreign elections for his own benefit. This is how Vladimir Putin went from a poor, tough kid in Leningrad to a KGB spy to the very symbol of modern Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker. It is widely said that Putin's public-facing tough guy persona can be traced back to him getting into fights when he was younger, which paved the way for him to take up judo. After getting a law degree from Leningrad State University, Putin joined the KGB Foreign Intelligence Service. He spent 16 years in the KGB. When Putin returned to Russia, he began his political career.
He went to work for Anatoly Sobchak, who was then the mayor of St. Petersburg.
That's Leonid Bershidsky.
I'm a columnist at Bloomberg View.
Putin thrived in Sobchak's administration because
he was sort of considered pretty efficient city official at that time. He was very loyal to Sobchak.
So loyal and efficient that
he was noticed by Yeltsin's close circle.
And those people soon brought Putin over to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's administration, where he quickly climbed the political ladder.
Then, of course, he was promoted to Prime Minister of Russia.
That's Dmitry Trenin.
I'm currently director of the Carnegie Moscow Center.
Around this time, Yeltsin and the people around him, the so-called family, decided that Putin would become Yeltsin's successor. And then this happened. The apartment bombings were carried out in 3 Russian cities, killing 293 people and injuring more than 1,000. Putin immediately accused Chechen separatists for the bombings and followed it up with action.
He was credited with having a very successful military campaign against the terrorists.
And it worked.
After that, he became an heir apparent in the eyes of the Russian people.
3 months later, Yeltsin resigned. And on his way out, a famous exchange.
He was getting into the car in the Kremlin, and the last words that he addressed to Putin before getting into his car was, "Take good care of Russia."
So Putin took over as president, and 3 months after that, won his first election. But just because Putin won the presidency, that didn't mean he had all the power. This is Michael McFaul.
I was U.S. ambassador from 2012 to 2014. In the 1990s, there was a fire sale of all the things worth owning in Russia, and certain people,
the oligarchs,
did better than others in that fire sale, sometimes called privatization, and those people tended to be well connected with the Yeltsin regime, and they weren't Putin's friends. But they probably miscalculated, thinking that they could easily find a way to influence him. It became impossible almost from the start. From that very moment, there was warfare between him and the oligarchs.
That's when Putin gave the oligarchs a choice. Putin's way?
Some of those people from the 90s managed to figure out a new way of dealing with Putin and have survived.
Or prison.
Others could not find common vision, and so they lost their assets.
Khodorkovsky once was Russia's richest person, worth $15 billion, but he ran afoul of President Vladimir Putin and spent a decade in prison.
With domestic power consolidated, Putin focused on restoring Russia's global influence.
Putin is the guy who believes in the expansionist Russian state. Georgia and Ukraine and all the other Soviet republics that split off when the Soviet Union fell apart, he still believes that they're traditional Russian satellites. A lot of his strategy is about keeping them in the orbit. That Yeltsin line, take good care of Russia, that's how he understands it.
And he used annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade to keep former Soviet republics in Russia's orbit. In 2008, Putin's 2 terms were up, and he decided to step down as president. Dmitry Medvedev stepped in as president, and Putin went back to prime minister. But really,
Putin never left power. He pretty much continued running the country, and Medvedev was a bit of a figurehead.
There was actually a period of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. that benefited both countries during Medvedev's presidency.
Because Medvedev did not have the same negative attitude towards the West as Putin did.
But when Putin came back to run for a 3rd term, in the lead up to the 2012 election, it is widely believed that both the presidential and parliamentary elections were rigged, and Russians took to the streets. Putin blamed the protests squarely on America, and more specifically, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
He believed that she had sent, this is his words, a signal to demonstrators.
Still, Putin won by a huge margin and set about crushing the protest movement immediately upon his return to the Kremlin. Over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled. Putin annexed Crimea, leading to sanctions. The price of oil fell drastically. The ruble hit a new low, and America played down Russia's influence, with Obama calling Russia a regional power. Despite all of that, Putin's approval rating remained sky high, and then an opportunity for payback.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
In 2016, there was one candidate who called Vladimir Putin very smart.
Trump exhibited tolerance towards Putin's actions annexing Crimea, and similar views on NATO and sanctions.
Secretary Clinton didn't support any of those views.
Even though Putin denies any wrongdoing,
U.S. election.
the the U.S. has accused Russia of being behind the leaking of 20,000 Democratic National Committee emails, which many say helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. Which leaves us here with the possibility of a President Putin until 2024, positioning Russia to be the world power he always imagined it should be.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant and one of the 10 largest companies in the world. Yet he still wants more.
We know where we're going. We want to be the 5th largest economy.
Big words from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos. He's confident, he's charismatic, and he's definitely not the average CEO. This is how a poor school teacher went from the classroom to being one of the most influential multi-billionaires in the world. Ma was born in China's southeastern city Hangzhou in 1964. His parents were traditional musician storytellers. As a teenager, he started to learn English from foreign tourists after China opened up in the late 1970s.
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
And I cover China Internet for Bloomberg.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local teachers' college. He graduated in 1988. He applied for 30 jobs and got rejected, including from the fast food giant KFC.
When KFC came to China, come to us say, 24 people went for the job. 23 people accepted. I was the only one guy.
Then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15 a month. On the side, he started a translation company with several friends. During a company trip to the US in 1995, Ma had his first encounter with the internet at a friend's place in Seattle.
I searched the first word beer. I don't know why, because it's easy to spell, baby. And I see beers from Germany, beers from USA, beers from Japan, but there's no beer from China.
So he searched for the word China instead and still couldn't find anything. And that got him thinking. He wanted to build
I am placing a new order to sell short euro again. The order I'm placing at 118.81.5. So if you're up to euro, you can follow my trade. Please copy this order and stay with me. We will go through this order and we will close this order in profit. Okay, guys? Stay safe.
像那个系统就这方面确实不知道，但是玩信息玩软的，中国的脑袋绝不比我们差。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比我们差。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma is an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's 5th largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it's served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon 67 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and tea during his youth. Thiel attended Stanford University.
Short position. Stay with me. We'll close this trade in profit. Okay, don't go anywhere. Stay safe.
After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
In VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secret of data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, ValueAg, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to get back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You have a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of cabinet positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out, Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as a board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
Two 2016 was again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. But now comes the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rising seas and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees Celsius this century, more than the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris Agreement means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The US was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's Energy Independence Executive Order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the US commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Businesses, cities, and US states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist, if you can believe that.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. torches, the creative content of a lot of the work at Lightbright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch. Some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file. And we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics, going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water.
Okay guys, I'm placing a stop on profit for Japanese yen. I'm moving even to better position at 109.330. Okay, this is right here. It will give us 20 pips in profit, 2,000 pounds. If you follow trades, if you already managed to sell short last week, well done guys. You are in good profit, and I'll speak to you later. We're still in trade, so we didn't close position, so stay with me and I'll speak to you later.
And continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it, and we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. bring it over to the aging table, where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
a bit like an addiction. You've got to make something. You have to do something. It's borderline obsession. And every bike we build is my favourite bike at the time, and as soon as it's done, I want to build another one. Spend cycles is something I've been thinking about ever since I started cycling in my late teens. We want bikes that ultimately you'll really enjoy riding. There's never a bike that's the same. There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people I know cycle have an idea of their dream bicycle, and it may be an evolving idea you've had in your head. And we've worked with a lot of people that have come to us with sketches and scrapbooks. It's really, really nice to build something that's just one-off and unique. I think a lot of people see a bicycle as two wheels and a frame in the middle. There are a lot of subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the riding characteristics quite dramatically. I'm a really big fan of modernist architecture, and the simplicity of a modernist building is really hard to achieve. And with some of our bikes, they may look very simple, but I think people should not underestimate the time and effort that goes into designing a product. Tubing is key to a bike's feel and ride. Reynolds tubing has been in my life ever since I can remember. Growing up, I could never afford a frame manufactured with their tubing. We can now put a badge on our bike saying manufactured Reynolds, which is a sort of thing as a kid I just wouldn't have believed was going to happen. Every part of the bike has a specific tube. It's not universal. The first thing we do is get the tubes out, check they're correct, check the wall thicknesses, sand the edges, make sure it's all really clean, because if it's not clean, the tubes won't join together correctly. We build in steel because I still believe it's one of the best materials to use. It's been used in bikes since the late 1800s, and they're still using it now for a very good reason. It's the flexibility that we can replace the tube, repaint the bike, and you wouldn't know it's damaged. I just like working with it. It's very sculptural. This isn't sort of aerospace precision engineering. It's a steel rule and a marker. So when we're cutting the tubes, it's within a mil or two. But what we're trying to do is take the best from bicycle building in the past and add a little bit of modern flair to it. There's various techniques for building bicycles. We do a thing called fillet brazing, where you connect a pipe together. We use a bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same temperature and we fill the joint with bronze. And it gives a very, very sort of fluid, lovely, sort of quite sculptural feel. You've got to practice. You've got to be able to judge material temperatures. You've got to just look at it and you just get a feel for it. It's a stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle. My father's a jeweler. He'd make sort of very pretty things, which are lovely, but for me, they don't really have any function. What I love about bicycles, you can start on a Monday with a box of tubes. You can be riding it by the weekend, and it can last you for the rest of your life. Outside of the frame and forks, the other most important part is the wheels and tyres. When you build the wheels, you have to lace them, so there's little holes going all the way around the rim. You poke the spoke through. We do build all our wheels by hand here because a machine can't get 30 years worth of wheel building experience. Colour is very, very personal. With any of our bikes, you can have them painted whatever colour you want. We've matched one to the teapot, so we can get that scanned and we can match that, or someone's favourite item of clothing. I like to let the bike sit for 4 or 5 days minimum, just so the paint can have time to cure a little bit, and then we assemble it. We get out all the new components, and it's a case of putting them together. Some bikes you can assemble in 3 hours, some will take 3 days. And we've built bikes that cost in the £10,000 plus mark. Some people, they're saving up and this is their bike and they're going to own it for the rest of their lives. So we just want to make sure they get the right thing.
Okay, guys, stop on profit for euro again at 118.79.5. I'm placing stop on profit at 118.79.5. Please do so. Please follow these. If you start following my trades, you have to go until the end. Okay? I'll speak to you later.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house or underneath the deck. But kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback. They surf wonderfully. It's beautiful and it feels great to be on one of them. I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched, you have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on. Like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand. Goes into these boards between 40 and 60 hours, start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far one of my top favorite parts. It's just you and a shaping stand, a board, and a hand plane. Everything else is out of your view. It's simple, it's pleasurable, it's quiet. You can be with your thoughts and you can just kind of be present. There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind. Once we've shaped it down and the board's looking like it's supposed to look like, it's time for it to go into the glassing room. 4-ounce fiberglass, laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board. Once both sides are lamb coated, it's time to put in the hardware. Drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leash plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, it goes back into the glassing room. We brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy and shiny and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of, we're looking at like doing it right. And
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 Grand Marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blued is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blued is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
Even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blood, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blood in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，我们初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blood means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，布鲁蒂能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同志互联网公司。
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of like predominantly Asian artists, really like making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but like for what was the question.
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just like, damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being like, okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of like my own kind of private office, basically. Like, to be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would like take pisses here, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And a good part of the day is at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy. And like just the shit that he was saying, like the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't. And he came up with Dat Stick like 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute road.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it. But the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just like everything about it, man. Just like, it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets like super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I did the sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
But you've been a bitch, sucking thick cock.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chiga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything that rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. You know, it's just more entertaining. We just edit it as tight as possible, put it up, and it really worked.
12 in the morning, pop shows.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on and a Reebok pouch. This is the hardest nigga of all time.
You said when you come for a chigga like me, that was dope.
It's just lit, and I think people will take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well, and one day it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it. Like, who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up. I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it. Like, next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and, what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this.
It's just Taco Bell. What could possibly go wrong?
To creating something like Tonight, Rich Chigga has a show in New York City. Tickets sold out in an hour.
I came here, I'm first online. I was here at 1. I was the third person online.
So why'd you get here so early?
Because I want to see Rich Chigga. I want to touch him.
What do you guys think of Joji?
He's That's my dad, son.
You guys cop the new EP or like?
Yeah. I woke up at 6 in the morning just to cop that shit. And then I listened to it, and that shit started making me cry.
This is actually kind of exciting. Every time, this never gets old. Like, you live online and social media, but like, there's nothing like just being with the people.
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But 88 Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for 88's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.